Superhero tabletop role playing games have been around for a very long time, making their debut well before the superhero boom. Despite the limitless options they provide for superhero creation, two common traits have plagued these games: very complex character creation and loose, almost flimsy combat.
Today, we're excited to share with you the next evolution in superhero tabletop role playing games that resolves these issues. It introduces a streamlined character creation and also combat that is dynamic, crunchy, and tactical. Today, we're going to talk to you about Indominant.
Hello and welcome to Tabletop Trends, where we take a look at the most fun and creative TTRPGs out there, ranging from the big names to the more obscure. We sit down with the designers, we ask questions, we crack some jokes, and we just play their games together. We're going to let you know how the game works and what makes it special, and the things that you might love and the things that you might not love. By the end of it, you should know the general idea of how the game feels and if it might be a good fit for your table. Today, we were lucky enough to get the chance to sit down with the lead designer of Indominant, Zarek Odinsky.
So, Indominant is a new superhero RPG. Combat is designed to be fast paced and tactical. How deep customization works is we've got an archetype and a power set. Your archetype's like your role, power set's what exactly you do, and it lets you create everything from like a melee focused character that uses fire powers all the way to somebody who's maybe healing and supportive but is a martial artist. We have a resource called Drive, which is consumed when you use your powers, but you can recover it under certain circumstances based on your archetype. And you've got to manage Drive to keep a good balance, and that makes combat engaging and tactical.
So, characters are a combination of two things: the archetype and the power set. The archetype defines what you do, and the power set kind of defines how you do it. And you can pair any archetype with any power.
We've got the Arbiter, who's like a support. They stand back and help their team. They protect them, they heal them, things like that. Blaster, they're range damage dealer, glass cannon. Bruiser, they're very tough. They just like take hits and dish them back out. Hunter, kind of a hybrid between a rogue and a ranger. You know, they are very quick, mobile, mid-range kind of character. And then the Guardian, we call him like the leader of the team. Block things, they defend themselves and they lead the team.
Each of these archetypes have two abilities core to their functionality, but they also all have different speed, defenses, attack range, and HP. For example, a blaster has a core ability that boosts their damage, but they are very poor at controlling the battlefield, whereas a guardian has a taunt ability built into its class. It has good defenses, but it has very poor range. You can then combine that with a power set, for example, ice powers. You could have an ice blaster that slows down the enemies, making it easier to kite them, and because they have such long range, it's very good. Or you could have an ice guardian that puts up walls of ice to protect your allies. One key thing about power sets is they all have a different inherent effect. This determines what your power does and how it affects the enemies around you, and it completely changes the feel of your character. For example, you might have a fire blaster that when they hit somebody with fire, it damages them over time. Or you could have a lightning blaster that when they hit a target, it jumps to another target. Or you could have a rock blaster that when they hit someone, it encases them in a shield of stone, protecting them. I did hit, so I should get my inherent effect, I think. So that should give me 5 stone skins. Each inherent effect encourages a different style of play, and that's before you even add in their specific powers. And what I mean is each power set has a list of powers that are specific to that one power set. The current power sets are Earth, Electricity, Fire, Gadgetry, Ice, Light, Martial Arts, Psionic, Super Strength, and Weapon Mastery. So combining that with your archetype, that's 50 possible combinations just at this point. Now to some people this might seem like a lot of choices already, but to other people, they might feel like this very restrictive coming from other superhero tabletop role-playing games. Especially once you learn that you can't combine and have multiple power sets. If your dream superhero is a speedster who can climb walls and shoot lasers out of their belly button, you might feel disappointed in that. We asked Zarek about this and what he might say to someone who feels like the power sets are restrictive.
When you read it, that's definitely the feel you get, right? We're very like, hey, customize, reflavor away. We had somebody who wanted to make like a Spider-Man type character, and if you look at our power sets, there's no spider powers, there's no webs, anything like that. You could use super strength powers and re-flavor some of them to be using your webs and stuff like that. And you can flavor how you're moving is like, web slinging around, stuff like that. The other aspect of that is, that simplicity, right, that we talked about earlier, where it's kind of like, here's the things that you can do, here's the flavors. It makes it easy to get started with. And then the people who, if an option's not there for them, but they want to customize it or they want something that's not there, they can go ahead and reflavor things. What I say is like, be open-minded, be totally willing to reflavor something, but it's definitely very possible.
So reflavoring your character is a possibility if you can find something that matches close to what your goal is. But the toned down number of powers also contributes to a tighter combat, and it makes character creation much easier. So unfortunately, that's the flip side of the coin. So your fire-breathing, shape-shifting empath might just have to turn into a fire breather. And that is a tough pill to swallow. But let me show you the amazing amount of choice you do have in Indominant. Every power set has different tiers of powers, starting with base powers, which are at-will abilities that consume no resources. Then you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, all the way up to tier 9. Every character will get to choose 3 out of 5 options for every tier. That means at just level 5, you have 12 possible ways to use your powers. Add on top of that your archetype abilities and talents, which are like feats, and you'll end up with an extremely customizable character. So as you come into Indominant, you need to be okay with having a mindset shift, and know that the amount of options you have here in combat are truly plentiful and very customizable, and they contribute to a fantastic combat experience. So what does this fantastic combat look like, and why did we describe it as crunchy, dynamic, and tactical? It all stems from a combination of 3 things: the number of options you have in combat, the action economy, and the drive mechanic. We've already talked about the number of options we have, so let's take a look at the action economy.
In combat, how you do attacks and things like that is we've got an action point system, but it's not just the kind where, everything you do is one action. We actually kind of hybridized. So you've got 4 action points on your turn. A main action is kind of like what you would think of as an action in D&D. That uses 2 action points. A minor action uses 1. A movement action uses 1 the first time you use it on a turn, and then it will use 2 every time after. And then you've got a reaction that everybody can take once per round. It doesn't cost action points or anything like that. But you could use 2 main actions to spend your 4 action points, or even 4 minor actions. It really drives that tactical decision making, where what is the best choice here? I've got this power that's a minor action and this one that's a main action. How many action points do I have left?
Although action point systems are far from new in TTRPGs, those coming from Dungeons & Dragons might think it's quite different. Generally speaking, it offers more flexibility in what your character can do on their turn. But those decisions on how you'll act are often determined by what powers you have. Do you have a minor action that will really help you in the situation? Or do you have a major action that also moves you at the same time? Now, as I'm describing all this, you might be wondering what keeps it all in check. And the answer is drive.
It's meant to be a sort of nebulous thing. Functionally, it's like mana, but everybody uses it. You have a limit, and every power uses the same number as its tier. So we've got, power tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and then every archetype has its own way to recover drive, and they interact with drive in their own way. And drive is kind of restricted. It's not the kind of thing where it's like just, guns blazing, use all your drive. Like you need to be kind of smart about it. It's not punishing to where if you just don't think about it, you're useless. That's why we have base powers, but you have to be pretty tactical about it.
Drive is essentially what underpins the mechanics of this game. It's one unified resource that characters consume when they activate higher tiered powers. And then I have 1 action left, so I am going to use my Hardened Skin. So this is a tier 1 power, so it's going to cost me 1 drive. And that's a minor action. I'm going to give Circuit Breaker a +2 damage resistance for 2 turns. Every character has an amount of drive equal to twice their level, and they regain drive when they do certain things that align with their archetype. For example, a hunter regains drive when they deal damage. This creates a really interesting decision point in combat. Every turn, you want to decide, am I going to use my higher tiered powers and consume more drive, Or should I be more conservative and allow myself to recover more and save more for later? This balance made for a really fun and interesting experience during combat.
Back down to 2 drive. Oh, it's getting dicey.
So every turn you'll be asking yourself some questions, such as, what do I want to accomplish? Do I have enough drive to accomplish that? Will doing that leave me with enough drive to protect myself at future turns? What combination of powers and action points can I use to accomplish that goal?
I feel like I should move, but I also don't want to. I'm gonna juice up again. I'm just gonna use my minor action to juice up, and that's gonna be on my turn. I'm gonna stay right there.
This might sound like a lot of things to be thinking about during a turn, but it makes for a very involved and invested combat. The number of options that you have in combat slowly builds over time, so by the time you have a lot of options, you already are very familiar with most of them. So hopefully it's not overwhelming, but yeah, it does make for a crunchier combat, for sure. We did ask Zarek to rate Indominant on how crunchy he thought it was, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 5th edition D&D being right in the middle at 5. This is what he said.
My initial gut response is like 7.5 or 8, because our goal is to be in between 5e and Pathfinder.
For those of you who don't know what crunch is, it's essentially the amount of options you have that are meaningful and will impact your future decisions. Also, it's the amount of math that needs to be done in order for anything to resolve. As for Indominant, I do agree it's crunchier than 5e. It has a lot more options in combat, so that gives it a lot of crunch. But in terms of the math you need to do, it's not really anything more than 5e. Some people hate crunch, some people love it. That's me. But know that Indominant is very reminiscent of Dungeons & Dragons 5e, if that's where you're coming from. So you'll be able to slide into combat with no problem. It's d20 based, has attack rolls and damage rolls, and even has its version of saving throws when you're trying to avoid an effect. One thing that is different but similar is they have their own version of the advantage system. They call it dominance, and essentially when you get a stack of dominance, you roll a d20 and you add a d4. You can continue increasing the stacks of dominance, and the d4 increases to a d6, d8, d10, d12, and eventually a d20. Those numbers that you roll in your dominance are added to the dice value of your d20. So if you rolled a 16 and a 4, that turns into a natural 20.
Should be, I think you're at 2.
I maxed out, but I can't use
Yeah!
it. 27.
You got an 18, but your dominance made you crit. So if it rolls max, you double it.
Oh
so
my
if you roll
gosh.
in 2d6 and you roll 6s,
So I
Wow,
got
you
1
got a
6. So
that's
12
plus the 5, 17.
17
Oh
plus the
yeah!
2. 19, if the 19 this guy
Holy
took-
cow, that's like all the damage we've ever done. It is really fun to build up stacks of dominance, which is kind of easy to do, but as you do so, your chance to crit becomes higher and higher, and crits are very impactful in Indominant, so it makes it very exciting. One thing that's very different in Indominant than it is in Dungeons & Dragons is their use of skills. Skills are very clearly separated from ability scores. In most games, if you are a dexterous person, you will naturally be good in skills like stealth. In Indominant though, even if you have a high agility, it doesn't necessarily make you good at stealth.
What we use is a skill system. It looks very familiar. It's decoupled from your stats, like your ability scores. Every single skill you have, whenever you use that skill, you get better at it. Anybody can get really good at anything if they practice, like zero to hero kind of feel. So we wanted to make it feel a little real in that way, like, oh, I picked so many locks and so now I'm really good at it.
Each skill has its own experience points that as you use the skill, you will gain experience points and level up that one skill. We did a couple of skill challenges in our game, and honestly, I have mixed feelings about it. One thing I really like about it is that it feels like those big skill bonuses you have are actually earned. You remember all those times that you failed or succeeded in sneaking past guards or stealthing into a spaceship or whatever, and it took time to build up to this big score that you have. Also, it eliminates the need for a dedicated skill monkey character. Anybody can be good at anything. One thing Zarek pointed out that I thought was interesting is that characters actually feel more inclined to participate in skills because they want to earn that experience. What I don't like about it is, one, I think it's going to be very tedious. I bet players are going to forget all the time to increase their experience points and level up their skills. And that's related to the second reason I don't like it, and I feel like it probably breaks immersion.
Hey, did you hear that noise? What's that over there?
Oh, wow. We can hear it real clear. Sorry, do I earn an experience point for breaking that door?
Yes, but you failed.
Oh, I failed. So I get 1. So if you're trying to drive a car and lose someone tailing you, then you have a skill challenge, you take a step back, see if you passed or failed, remember to write down how many experience points you got, and then you jump back in. It feels like it easily could be a mental break from what's currently happening. And those high roleplay moments out of combat are the ones that people should be most invested in. And speaking of out of combat scenarios, this is obviously one place that it is vital to get right for superhero games. Indominant's design strategy is crunchy in combat, but loose outside. Unfortunately, right now, I think it's too loose. And this is probably just because it's a primer or a preview into the rules. The full guide is going to have things that help define this, but right now there are no real rules for how to use your powers outside of combat.
You know, you just mentioned like there's nothing that tells you what if I can freeze a cup or if I can freeze everything, you know. So that's a big goal for our comic editor compendium, is to have a lot of guidance on things like that, you know, just to make sure people can grasp the understanding of like how to do it in a superhero system or setting, you know, what kinds of things people might find, what kinds of things they might be able to do. Absolutely, yeah.
And although I know it's going to come, it's a portion of the rules that I have not seen yet, and there's currently no guidance for, so be aware of that. One final thing that I think might be a turnoff to people is its setting. This isn't a modern superhero game, it's a sci-fi one, where there is space travel and multiple planet exploration. And those themes percolate through the rulebook, but honestly, I don't feel like they're actually tied to sci-fi at all in terms of the actual rules. I feel like with the current rule set, you could easily make it into a modern superhero game, or even a fantasy one. You just might need to reflavor some high-tech enemies into just having those powers. And you might need to remove super suits too. That's probably the one thing. But I could actually see this being a really cool system to mimic Avatar: The Last Airbender. Now, if all this talk is whetting your appetite and you want to dive in and play this game, well, I asked Derek how people could participate.
Yeah, so we've got our website, odinskey.com. We're on all social media platforms. We've got a newsletter on our website, so every month we send out at least one update a month. We try not to be too bothersome. We have blogs that we do. We've also got a backer kit. That's going to be for our 3 core rule books, so you can just search us up, Indominant, on backer kit, and you should be able to see our pre-launch page and follow us for more news.
All right, now that we've given everyone a basic introduction to the game, let's talk about things that we really liked and things we maybe didn't like so much, and who we think this game is meant for. So, Jeremy, what did you think about it?
I honestly really enjoyed pretty much everything about Indominant. Like the whole time we were playing, it felt like a really fun, super engaging game, and it felt really, really tactical. It felt like there was enough choice of things to do that kept me kind of engaged, and really felt like everything kind of had a meaningful impact. But I'm curious about your thoughts as well.
I totally agree. Like, the 4-action economy felt really good. I thought I'd probably fall into some like, okay, I'm just going to do this and this and this, but it didn't happen that way. It felt like there's a lot of reasons to do a lot of different stuff, and so it felt very engaging and tactical that way. Especially
Definitely.
with like the drive system. I mean, my character worked a little bit differently, but it was super interesting to see your character having to like balance and like, oh, I'm getting too low. Oh, okay, I have enough drive to like do what I want, and keeping that there. And I think that mixed with the action economy, mixed with like the plentiful number of powers, like every turn you're like feeling like you have this like feast of like, yeah, what can I eat? What can I get next? Yeah.
I love the different ways that that you're able to recover drive differently per class. I think that feels really cool and really kind of unique to the system. It's not just, oh, everyone gets their drive back every morning. Every class is their own unique way, which kind of tailors your play style a little bit more, which is really fun and really exciting to play through.
Yeah, it was exciting. I felt like there actually was a surprising amount of like teamwork, especially trying to build up that dominance dice together felt super fun. Those are like my 2 big takeaways. Like that combat is fun, it's tactical, it's engaging.
For sure.
And then like that dominance buildup is super cool.
Feels really cool and really exciting, and it's kind of fun when you get to stack all these extra dice together. The more dice you get, you feel like you're getting closer and closer to scoring that crit, and it's a cool moment. And when the stars align and everything works out, it feels really cool. I'm curious though, like, let me know what are some of the things you wish could have been a little bit better about Indominant though.
Yeah, so for me, I feel like one of the biggest parts of superhero games is out of combat play. I think a
Yeah.
lot of people create superpowers and they want to see like what would I do with this superpower in real life, you know? And so the rules that are not here on that felt very lacking. I think at one point I'm like, can I face through the ground? I have earth powers. Can I like shift in there? And there's like, no, not really, maybe. And so like I think clear guidance on that is really important. It feels like
Yeah.
it's going to come, but if that's what you're looking for, then maybe Indominant's not quite what you want.
The big one for me outside of that was the skills system, and it sounds conceptually really fun, but I think in play it feels a little bit tedious and can be a little bit overbearing. I think there was even a moment during the session where you actually had to kind of stop Zarek and ask like, "Hey, do I get an experience for that?" It's a little bit on the immersion breaking side, I think, but I'm curious to see how that kind of evolves or grows. But and this kind of also ties back to what we were talking about before about kind of out of game, because a lot of this is sort of that out of game element. The skills, that's really where they're going to shine. It's where they're going to come into play.
Yeah.
So it's like the one big element that they have in place for out of combat play feels a little bit tedious and a little bit overbearing, like I said before.
Yeah, and I think also like if their strategy is crunchy in combat, loose outside of combat, then I think the skills should be less crunchy. You know, I think
Yeah.
like tying them back to ability scores might be fine. Make things a lot looser and like generalized, and I think that's one area that I think could be really improved.
Definitely, I'm fully with you on that.
Yeah. I guess all in all then, like what kind of people do you think would love this game?
I mean, if you love tactical games, I think this is going to be a great one for you. And if you have any interest at all in superheroes and you have an overlapping interest with tabletop role playing games, you're going to love it.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if you're that person that just loves options, things to do on your turn.
Yeah.
If you want a superhero game where you can feel like you deserve that win because it was like it came down to the line, like everything mattered, and like you everything in combat feels like so epic. Then I think this is the kind of game that you're gonna really thrive in. Like I think Indominant really has a niche here and really a good offer in that area.
Overall, I have to say that I think Indominant has a place in the superhero TTRPG space by doing things that others have often fumbled on. It's got deep combat, great character creation that doesn't take hours, but it's also fulfilling and has great character advancement. After discovering this hidden gem, it does make me wonder what else is out there waiting to be played.
Find out with us next time on Tabletop Trends.